All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Media, Race, and Community Knowledge Practices Conference. As you know, if you've been here for a bit, my name is Sherry Irvin. I am one of the organizers, and I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of Oklahoma. I'll let Professor Ware introduce himself.
My name is Lawrence Ware, and I am a professor of philosophy at Oklahoma State University, the best state in Oklahoma, and also the associate director of the Center for Africana Studies. She's laughing because she knows that's true.
We have a healthy rivalry here, a long-standing rivalry.
It's love. It's all love, though. It's all love.
It is absolutely all love for you, not for your whole institution. But I digress. The final presenter of our conference is Dr. Jessica Marie Johnson. Dr. Johnson is Associate Professor in the Department of History at Johns Hopkins and Director of LifeX Code, Digital Humanities Against Enclosure. She is a PI of Black Beyond Data, a Black Studies Computational Humanities Lab initiative, and co-PI of the Diaspora Solidarities Lab, a virtual Black feminist pedagogies and practice lab. Her award-winning book, Wicked Flesh, Black Women, Intimacy, and Freedom in the Atlantic World, was published by the University of Pennsylvania Press in 2020. Her presentation is Race, Imagination, and Black Digital Practice on Social Media.
Comments will be offered by Dr. Michael Williams, who is Assistant Professor of Educational Professions at Frostburg State University in Maryland. I've been there before. His dissertation was Am I Man Enough? Black Male Masculine Identity Development in the Digital Landscape of Twitter. And his recent research has focused on inclusive leadership. Now, we'll turn it over to Dr. Johnson.
Hello. Thank you all. I'm really excited to be here, be able to chat with you a little bit. I'm honored to be able to kind of close things out, although I think there's still closing remarks to come. I'm going to very, very much admit and just let Dr. Williams off the hook because he did not receive my presentation ahead of time. So I just want to everybody know that. And so hopefully this can be a robust discussion, and maybe Michael will do fast work. And if not, that's okay, because that would be on me. This is a bad thing that you do. Don't do this, scholars. Okay, so, but it is really great to be here. I think this is a really important conversation that we need to keep having. There are a lot of big questions that I am not, unfortunately, going to be able to touch on. And I know I've been able to tune in and out of the conference over the last day and a half or so. And I know some exciting stuff has been touched on in the last bit. I was especially excited by Dr. Catherine Knight Steele's presentation, which was incredibly powerful. Her work is so important. I feel very much inspired by, beholden by, held by her work on digital Black feminism. And I see this discussion that I'm going to have, or some provocations, as sort of the other side in some ways of where she was offering us some frameworks for thinking about Black feminist thought in particular, as it manifests on social media, but also Black organizing, community engagement, community work. So I'm going to share my screen and just get started. I know we only have so much time, and I do hope that we can have a really rich conversation. Hopefully everybody can see that. I'm going to leave the menu bar there at the top just to make sure that it doesn't kind of expand and shift screens or anything. So as you see, the title shifted just a little bit. It's still the same ideas, but I really wanted to hone in a little bit more on community knowledge and as well as digital practice, Black digital practice, and how to think about that in terms of social media. Because again, I think when I say that, I think this is sort of like the inverse of Catherine's talk. I really mean that. There are ways of thinking about the work that happens behind the scenes of social media that I think is incredibly important. We're talking about where community engagement is happening, where communities are connecting, what kinds of ideas are emerging from that are beholden to earlier trends in social media, and what kind of themes are maybe emerging now in the wake of so much that has happened. So I'll talk a little bit about some of like landmarks that I'm thinking about. But before that, a little bit about how I trace my trajectory. And that QR code goes to a different set of resources, but there's some interesting stuff there. You're welcome to check it out. So for me, digital Black studies has very much been a journey. And if you know me, you know my work. I do not come to digital Black studies, digital humanities, social media, any of this through the academy in any kind of way. For me, this is very much engaging with the digital broadly as a tool and as a media that could be useful in thinking through what I now know is Black feminist thought. And at the time was sort of thinking about orientations in the world as a Black scholar, as a queer scholar, as a Black Puerto Rican scholar, all of these different things. And doing that in conversation with folks who are also engaging in radical media, radical women of color thought online, engaging in archives and histories and archives and how that might operate. And this all predated, our social media ecosystem of the present. So whether that's Tumblr getting established in 2006, Twitter getting established in 2008, Facebook, granted, was around and was there, but really the work and the communities that I'm thinking of that were around African Diaspora PhD, Latinx Project, and became sort of the impetus for Theta Electric Marronage, and I'll get into that, were folks who are working, in spaces like MySpace, we're working in spaces like LiveJournal, GeoCities, if anybody is of the age, you guys remember the little GIF fires that used to be at the bottom of the screen. You're a real one if you remember this. If not, that's okay. You missed the era. It was a moment. And so, there are ways that, and I'm getting to corroborate what Catherine was saying, that there's a longer history of the practice of what is now Black digital practice, what I argue is Black digital practice. There's a longer history of that as a practice of community engagement, of connecting with communities, of radical thought and consciousness raising, that some scholars bring back to consciousness raising groups and circles, writing circles, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and that I think this was a real moment. I chart this moment really around 2006 to 2008 and Ally Media Conference and folks who are around there. And then there's another moment around 2012 that I think is incredibly important, that's showcased and indexed by Trayvon Martin's murder and Troy Davis's, I'm going to call it a murder, but murder by the state. Those moments become really, really key. Other organizers chart the moment of the Jena 6 as also a really key moment as far as being digitally aware of the power that having conversations across digital platforms might have. So Color of Change emerges from that moment. There was a blog on What About Our Daughters that emerged in that moment. So there's a deep, deep history there. And I think what I want to point to throughout this presentation is what it means to think about a practice, what it means to think about engagement in that kind of longer frame. I think this also goes with Professor Medina's presentation that just a second ago. I want to think with Marissa Parham's work always of understanding the both descriptive and generative of African-American experiences of memory and space, of the ways that it really kind of turns time inside out, but also hopefully, and I think really needs to in these present moment, challenge us to remember that the practice of this work is not beholden to the platform, and that in fact, the platform is most powerful for our communities, Black diaspora communities, when we are using it as a tool, as a weapon, as a strategy, and not getting caught up in the tool itself being the mechanism for revolution. And I say that's really important now because there's a lot of conversations around AI and the power of AI, and let's solve AI, and let's refresh AI, let's do all these different things. And again, it comes back to this emphasis on the tool as opposed to that connection relationality of community. And I think digital Black studies is a really important refraction and that prioritizes that. In my work in the academy, one of the spaces that I found really, really important to kind of think through social media as sort of bits of Black engagement and Black radical politics that, come together, separate, swirl together in all kinds of interesting ways. Black Code Studies was one of those ways. So their quote is not on here, but Aaliyah Brown and Josh Crutchfield, one of the things we were able to do with this volume, which is in the Black Scholar, was co-edited by myself and Dr. Mark Anthony Neal, was bring together folks who are doing work around Black Twitter stories and Black academia online. And so there are ways that folks have, the Black scholars in particular, but also Black organizers have mobilized the hashtag as a really important indexing feature to bring work together, to bring scholars together, bring issues to the surface. And surface will be a thing that comes up over and over, surface of social media, whether it's the kind of ocean that is Twitter, whether it is Tumblr, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the hashtag has become a kind of real encapsulation of that, to think with actual living events that have happened. There's Trayvon, but then there's also Mike Brown in 2014, and the importance of the hashtag around Mike Brown, the hashtag around Black Lives Matter, and the Black radical revolution that has continued to emerge and unfold since, and the backlash that has happened as a result of that. So I think there's something really important here to think about in terms of what ways the devices of technology, the devices of social media platform have allowed for that. But I also think it's something important, again, to come back to, I didn't have the right, oh, this does not have the same, the slide that I wanted, but that's okay. The question I want us to come back to, where it was a very fancy slide, I think again comes back to what do we do, what do scholars do, what do organizers do, what do communities do when the platforms and the tools themselves change? So the question to think about, I'm sure has been resonant throughout, is like, in a post-X, post-Meta world, what are the ways that organizing is happening? And what do we do with social media, the tool, the X, now the Meta, in this kind of context? And I think this is a big question mark. I just want to preface that. There are no answers that are going to come from me in any definitive way. What I'm going to now move into are some of the ways that I just want to kind of surface, again, that word, some of the things that have been happening under the water of social media engagement, in part because X and Meta emerged in such a problematic and, in a lot of ways for us, dangerous ways. I want to surface some of that, what's going on in the water, and then sort of end with what this might look like as it emerges into that, as a surface into the post-X, post-Meta, newly AI world now. And again, it's going to be mostly question marks, I think, than anything else. So in 2020, and so we have Trayvon Troy Davis, we have Mike Brown, in Baltimore, we have Freddie Gray since 2016. And then you have the COVID, as the folks say. And then you have George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, which I know has been discussed here, and so many others. So it was an incredibly hard and hot summer. And it was in that fall afterwards, in the wake of being inside and also engaging with so much happening online and so much discussion of violence and of the impact of state violence, state surveillance, everything, that me and Dr. Christina Thomas, then was a graduate student, co-founded Life Code Humanities Against Enclosure. And the idea was to think about what the digital humanities might offer in the wake of all of this. It was an idea that we had sort of been playing around with before this, before the summer of 2020, and then the summer hit and we realized this really needs to happen now, that there is a possibility of thinking about some of these tools in a way that captures them as tools and also brings together the energy that was happening across various communities, many students, many who are researchers, many who are community members, who I'll outline as we go through briefly. And it was always with the idea that this would in some ways bring the work and the interests that I in particular have, but I think so many have, in doing DH, not out of like the academy and institutions of DH and DH centers and whatever else, but bringing it back down to Black digital practice and bringing it down by thinking in terms of a grammar of refusal and a language of freedom for digital humanities. Now today, Life Code Projects is a map that looks like this. It really started, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, but it's little bubble in the middle, Tayed Electromarronage. It really just started there, and that was 2019, and then it became, so much more. We have labs, we have micro labs, we have projects that sort of span different labs. We have bridges. There is a lot going on, and this is now 2023 to 2024. One of the things we decided early on was that we will be guided by particular principles. You can visit these at lifexcode.org/about. We have 6 principles, and throughout, so much of this has been guided by the 2019 exhibit that Simone Lee, Saidiya Hartman, and Tina Kempf had at the Guggenheim around Simone Lee's work and the pieces that emerged out of that, one of which was Tina Kempf's piece that offered keywords for Black feminist thought around how to experience freedom in a scenario of containment. And so that was the loophole of retreat in 2019. And those keywords were insurgency, vessel, touch, surface and formation. So each year since, we have taken up one different keyword. We started with insurgency because that was summer of 2020. We moved on to vessel and thinking about, okay, what does it mean to kind of hold what we have, what we've created, the connections we're making. Last year was touch, which was also the first year I think a lot of people were really outside, back at work, back in classrooms, like in seminar spaces. And then here we have surface this year as where, and this again, why that keyword is keep continuing to come up. What are we surfacing? What of the work needs to be seen? What of the work needs to be for us? What of the work is still in progress? All of that. So surface is the keyword that we're working through now. Since then, it's important to note there has been a second phenomenal loophole of retreat, exhibition, event, performance, retreat, engagement, all of it in Venice at the Biennale when Simone Lee was manning the US pavilion. And now there's 5 new keywords. So I'm also excited again about what, these next set of keywords might imagine. But just to pull it back really quickly, one of the other pieces here about why, thinking about grammar of refusal is important, why thinking about loopholes of retreat and marronage is important, is that one of the structural piece of this is that Life Code doesn't exist. It's not a JHU project. It's a collective of labs. It spans well beyond JHU, and it's not institutionally supported. Like, it's not like a budget out of JHU. It is supported by outside grants that I apply for, that other individuals who are part of Life Code apply for, or it is sponsored by like what I might happen to have in my research budget. And that's important to note when we're thinking about sort of structures of how things are created and the tools that we might have available. Thinking with Lauren Olamina, what is in our go bag? We have what we need like right now to do things. And also there's limits to that, right? Like there's limits to not being part of an institution in a particular kind of way. So those are just pictures from the Biennale. All right, so in the time since the founding, several things emerged, I think, as some kind of key principles to kind of think with that I thought I might line up here, because I think in some ways and you notice I haven't mentioned social media for Life Code yet. We started with the work, not with the actual social media platforms in almost every single case. I'll mention the one that is the single exception, and it's a particular one. And so what that has allowed us to do is really take seriously what are the kinds of guiding forces around being against enclosure. So one is digital rooted in histories of African diaspora, Black study and slavery as the operating system. This is a principle that we found incredibly important in thinking about what is accessible and what is not accessible to us online. And so instead of seeing social media platforms or the digital writ large as just tools that can be or should be used strategically, we actually sort of leaned into opacité, thinking of glissant. We actually leaned into sort of, again, that piece of refusal, leaned into not putting things online. Again, in the transition from X and Meta into what X and Meta is now, there was a lot of hate speech. I don't know if, and people are on now or have forgotten, but those few years were virulent with attacks related to, that ended up becoming the January 6th attack in DC, the almost coup. That was an era that was virulent with, for those of us who are doing any histories of slavery, attacks around the 1619 Project, and just the fact of slavery existing, very motivating factor of the United States formation. And so it was not a time that was really open to being online. And Catherine also talked about this, about the ways that thinking about the group chat, thinking about paywalls, like those are mechanisms that those with incredibly high profiles in particular use to kind of protect themselves and also continue to engage in community. For those of us who are like sort of seeing that, it became really clear that maybe these platforms were not the safest right now, and how might we then find ways of gathering? And I'll get to how we worked around that then. Knowing that the digital rooted history of slavery, moving towards and thinking about marronage became incredibly important. What does it mean to come from Black people as data also became incredibly important because of the ways that it became clear that conversations, even around social justice, indexed by hashtags, incredibly powerful and important, but also became diminished to just the logic of that particular hashtag, that particular question. And so that refracted a lot of things for us that actually really emerged in one of the projects that became a full lab, a Mellon-funded project, Black Beyond Data. And that's PI by myself, Dr. Kim Gallen, Dr. Alexander White. It's a Black data ecosystem that is thinking about data from a host of perspectives, health data, slavery data, and Black community data. And Dr. Kim Gallen is one of the founders, and I think of as one of the founders of Black digital humanities, digital Africana studies. And in that, for us, always was like, okay, so where's the humanity, right? Like, so even as we're thinking about engaging in systems, whether that's social media platforms, whether that's the COVID-19 conversations, the different surveys, the different medical information that was getting collected, what does it mean to remember Black humanity? And all of these things began to come together. So to come together all at once. So for example, what I don't have here, one of the projects that Dr. Callan led was COVID Black, is still COVID Black. And one of the projects that emerged out of this collaboration and support from Black Beyond Data was a database of first-person interviews with Black nurses and healthcare providers during COVID, something that nobody else was covering and nobody else seemed invested in like actually collecting. Even though these are people who are, a lot of the nursing and medical, especially the nursing professionals are people of color, Black, and like Black, not just Black US, Jamaican, Caribbean, of African descent, of continental African descent, all of those. And so it was that question of like, where is the Black humanity became really, really key. And this is just a quick map of Black Beyond Data. Another question was, sort of like, how do we have this conversation? Now we're in COVID, now we're in like quarantine, now we have this conversation. If we're not gonna have it on social media, which should not feel safe, where can we have this conversation? Where can we promote it? So we partnered with St. Francis Neighborhood Center, which is in West Baltimore. It's a community-based center serving a majority Black district, to create reading groups around data. So these are the ones, this is now our fourth year. This is now our fourth semester, our third year. And these are the ones that are lined up for this year. This is actually this Friday, Isaac Goudreau. Since those began, they have expanded from a focus on sort of scholars who are in the US to now I think all of these scholars are focusing on something that is US or diaspora, except Tawana Petty, who came and sort of set us out on thinking about AI. And so just the evolution from, like where the conversation was to this now same group and same people coming back again and again and again to the Zoom space has developed so that we're able to have even more expansive conversations that range across a whole host of different communities. And so, I think the Zoom space becomes a really, really key device and space for sociality and for consciousness raising that we're maybe not talking about enough. Again, doesn't count, I think, technically as a social media platform, but for me, what becomes really important is the practice and where the practice is happening and how the practice can be engaged. But it's not like social media isn't there. So our other community partners who are doing really like very much specific on the ground work with Black youth in the city throughout this entire time, we're also engaging social media. And this is the profile for New Generation Scholars of Muse 360, which is one of our community partners. They build out African diaspora skills, knowledge, and capacity to take young people to Cuba, to St. Croix, to all around the world to actually engage physically with Black communities. And so they continue to use Instagram in particular. We're not so active on Twitter, and so we can talk about that and reasons why, but Instagram became, for them, the really important place of engagement. And this is one of the posts, I had to take it off the Instagram because it was planned. But this is this is like some of the kinds of things that they're sharing, on social media, letting folks know, hey, we're engaged, we're coming together. This is we're tripping to Chicago, to the archives. This is African Diaspora Alliance, which is one of the other organizations, the third organization that is one of our community partners with that. And so speculating, creating, play, and imagining otherwise, this is a thing that has always been really, really powerful and important to me about social media, that it surfaces things that are already happening in Black community, radical community structures, which is that we are not all doom and gloom. We're not just interested in the deaths or in the data. We're actually really, really invested in our whole spirit, in our whole pleasure, in our whole play. And that piece has, in the digital humanities that emerges out of the academy, sort of been set to the side as something that's sort of a add-on or even not important conversation around what's happening when we're creating projects, when we're thinking about digital and technology, now data and AI. But actually, this is the piece that keeps people coming back, that keeps us whole. So speculating, creating, playing, imagining otherwise, and thinking about just even that last clip, all of that remains really, really critical. This is the space that dialectic marronage emerged from. What does it mean to, find and create spaces of freedom, even within the imperial constructs of the academy, emerging with 4 different rules. How do you escape? How do you steal? What does it feel like? And then whatever, which is a kind of that inexpressible, jouissance that you just can't really put into words, but is such a Black girl, Black femme affectation. This was created by Dr. Giamatti Figueroa and myself. Initially it was literally conversation on the back porch, again, not on social media, conversation on her back porch in lived reality, doing tarot cards, and then became a project we were able to pull our Black girl graduate students into, who are often the only one of their program or trying to figure out how to navigate a very strange academic world. And we're able to kind of create community with them together. So these are electricians. They organized events like this. It was absolutely all their design, their idea. They organized exhibitions like this. So it also became this pedagogical space that that unexpectedly, I think we imagined that it would be a space for teaching. We imagined a space for a community, but this emerged of their own volition. They organized that event, all of these things, like they're just amazing. So what does it mean to think about community, accountability, small and grassroots work, slow intentional work as the only work worth doing? This all happened very incrementally. For me, this was a praxis that I found incredibly important all the way back in the Radical Women of Color blogging days, which is that things happen in small bites, things are emergent, things happen because one person said no, said yes, whatever it is. A lot of this practice can be found in work by Adrienne Marie Brown. I want to make sure I cite that. Emergent strategy is very much a principle that we abide by. And so it's something that, as we saw with that electric marronage, we saw it emerge, we literally saw it do its work. We're like, well, where else can we begin to kind of innovate and apply that practice and apply other kinds of pacing and other kind of principles to the work that we want to do? So just the last set of examples, and then I'll stop. Kids for Black Louisiana is one of those. This is research that's happening in collaboration with the New Orleans Jazz Museum. This team has emerged over the last 2 years. It started with like 4 of us. Now it is this amazing team that stretches from HBCUs in Louisiana to Baltimore and DC and everywhere. The most important piece here in a lot of ways to me is that we host summer workshops where we connect to Black public historians and descendant communities. And we have a definition of descendants that is incredibly important. Yola Dance, who is currently now president of the Montpellier Association and Foundation, is really somebody who made sure that we have a definition of descendant community that were operationalized. These are just pictures from